This is Generation Space, the official podcast of Air Force Space Command.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Master Sergeant Dave Sanlitri, and welcome to another episode of Generation Space, where we're on the road again, talking GPS-3. We're here at gorgeous Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and I got some awesome subject matter experts next to me. Sir, if you want to introduce yourself, talk to a little bit about what you do here.
Yeah, so I'm Lieutenant William Gleason. I work with the 45th Range Squadron for the 45th Space Wing. I'm the Range Operations Commander for this mission.
Okay, cool.
And I'm Jack Bauer. I'm a mission assurance engineer for the 5th SLS. So specifically for the Delta rocket, I cover the first stage.
Isn't Jack Bauer a spy, international man of mystery?
You're not supposed to talk about that.
Okay, my bad. There we go. And that's the first time I got shot on the show. Cool. So talk to me a little bit about what's going on when it comes to GPS-3. We're hopefully not that far out from the launch. And talk to us about the nuances of either the mission or, this rocket behind us. Who wants to take that one?
So I'll start off. So for GPS specifically, it's the last 4 meter for a Delta. It's actually the last single stick for a Delta as well. So some nuances with that, slapping on the solid rocket boosters as it's going up. From here on out, we're just going to be doing Delta heavies. Also with the processing, we're right about a month, just shy of a month out from launching this rocket. So hopefully we're proceeding forward.
So when you say the last of the single stick, what's the historical significance, or even with going to the heavy? What is that? Why is that good?
Well, it just depends on mission specific requirements. So where they're going, how much we're launching up into orbit, where specifically in orbit it's going. So the follow-on launches are all heavies. They're all NRO requirements. So it's just a different mission requirement.
Okay, cool. So what with the rock? And that's a cool thing to say. But what talk to us about working at the Rock Range Ops Center. What's the role that has into launch?
Yeah, so really the whole mission of the range is to make sure that the flight of the vehicle and the spacecraft are safe for the general public, as well as safe for the satellite itself. So our big mission essentially is monitoring the vehicle while it's in flight and tracking it and making sure it's on its nominal trajectory so that we can get the spacecraft to its intended orbit. So one of the biggest responsibilities that we have as part of the range is on the mission flight control officer. So they're in charge of actually seeing the telemetry returns and the radar returns that we get from the vehicle in flight, and if it's going too far off course, then it could be a hazard to the general public, and they're in charge of destroying the vehicle in flight, just in case.
Right. Worst case scenario, but it's good to have that fail-safe in there just
exactly
to preserve life. We spent some time yesterday talking to Det 3 and those folks, and all they focus on is preserving life and worst case scenario. It's so weird for a job to be so focused on worst case scenario, but that's one of the big things that they do there. Now you're going to be leading this GPS-3 launch, right? Coming up. What is your mission looking like? What's the big thing that you're kind of focused on? How's this different than maybe some other launches possibly?
So this will be my first mission as a range operations commander. Previously I was a range control officer, so their main section that they pay attention to is all the range instrumentation, so the radars, the telemetry units, the range safety systems, the communications, just anything with hardware that belongs to the range control officer is in charge of monitoring and determining if we're still able to meet our safety requirements and actually track the vehicle. So then you also have the mission flight control officer that is in charge of making sure the flight is safe for everybody involved, and then the other third piece of the puzzle is the rocket themselves, and they're in charge of synthesizing all of the range crew members and all of their efforts in order to make sure everything is good to go and on time and coordinated with ULA and or really any launch agency and range user.
A couple moving parts here.
A lot of moving parts.
That's exhausting.
It's a little stressful.
Yeah, not bad for a 25-year-old. I think of what I was doing at 25. It wasn't providing safety to thousands and running $1 million programs.
Yeah, if you had told me that I'd be doing a job like this right out of like college, I probably would have laughed in your face and walked away.
Like me? Really? Nice. So tell us a little bit about what's going on here when it comes to launch. What are your specific roles here? What are the things you've seen that are just maybe noteworthy or historic that's going on here?
So as far as the vehicle itself, processing-wise, a lot of it is working with ULA on the testing that we're doing. So when we get rocket pieces in, of course, it's all got to be assembled. It's got to be put on the launch stand, and then a lot of testing goes into it. We test the rocket up as it is now, making sure everything's communicating. We call that CST. And then whenever we put the spacecraft on top, which will happen next week sometime, we call that integrated systems test. So we go through and make sure that the rocket's all communicating, everything's talking to each other. All the flight termination systems are communicating properly. That way, when the rocket does send the signal, or whoever, it does communicate properly. Then as we go through and get to launch day, everything is about getting the rocket ready, fueling the rocket with its cryofuels, which takes a significant amount of time. Something is going to happen.
Yep.
Something's going to go wrong.
Something always happens.
And you don't know what it's going to be, but you just got to be ready for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that could even be simple things like weather, all right? I mean, like, we're sitting here, it's a nice day, but yesterday for like 20 minutes, it was like Noah's flood going on.
Florida in the summer, you're going to have issues with weather. Yeah. So that is always a factor as we're going through and doing things.
So talk to me about a little bit about like the critical phases here. Like I know like it shows up. The rocket shows up from is it
Decatur?
From Decatur, yeah, from Alabama is that? What are the critical phases to get to? I guess where are we now? Mm-hmm. And then the phases following on.
Okay, so when the rocket first shows up, it shows up in its pieces. So we could have the first stage show up separate from the second stage, and then the SRBs also show up separately.
SRBs being?
Solid rocket boosters, sorry. The two that are the two white things that are on the side.
Of course, no, but it's for our audience.
I do apologize. But no, so we'll have every component show up separately to include the GPS spacecraft. And then what we do is we start processing the vehicles, usually in the horizontal fashion. The second stage will get put vertical, get all of its testing done, and then it'll go back horizontal and we'll put the first and second stage together. Then we'll bring it out to the pad and they'll lift it vertical.
How long does that,
so it can vary.
Okay.
So we've got right now our next mission, we've already got it sitting over in the horizontal integration facility right now.
Okay.
And it's not going to launch until June or July of next year.
Wow.
Sometimes we can have components show up within a couple months of their launch. So it kind of varies, especially the spacecraft doesn't usually get here for very long, but the first and second stage will usually be out here for a while for Delta. As they begin processing and put it up on the pad, that's when things start ramping up, getting a little bit quicker. And so once you get the first and second stage together in vertical on the pad, then you can start strapping on the solid rocket boosters. I'm sorry.
So is it like all that stuff? Is it pretty much like you almost have it down to a science? It's not like it's like everything happens, falls into place. Or?
Yeah, ULA is great with it. Especially adjusting on the fly with any little nitnoid differences, weather impacts. A lot of times have to run early shifts just to avoid that afternoon shower as you're trying to do a lot of these ops outside. But
are you saying that because there's a security person standing right over here right now, or no?
Not at all.
Sorry, keep going. Yeah.
No, so once we get the rocket vertical and we've got everything attached, we'll begin to do further on testing, working with hydraulics, working with pneumatics, making sure that we don't have any leaks, that everything in the vehicle is properly sealed and communicating together. And then once the rocket's good to go, then we'll throw on the encapsulated assembly, which has the space vehicle in it.
Okay.
And basically that's just GPS sitting on a fairing connection with the encapsulated fairing around it.
Is that up there right now?
It is not up there right now.
Okay,
that's actually over at Astrotech.
When does that happen? Usually like a day out, a week out? Do we even talk about that kind of stuff?
It really kind of depends again on the launch window. In this case, it'll happen about a few weeks out for GPS, and that's just to kind of give you some margin. Sometimes we'll cut that margin down and we'll be real tight.
Sure.
Usually for Delta, we try to do it at least a couple weeks out.
Right on.
Just because, again, something's going to go wrong. But usually it's all manageable. But you try not to put the spacecraft up there too early.
Okay, cool.
And so then after all that processing, you got everything buttoned up. They'll actually roll that structure 300 feet back, and it will... it's actually incredible to see it move. It never moves when it's supposed to, but it does move. And then they actually start fueling the rocket about 4.5 hours before launch. So we'll come in about 8.5 hours prior, start doing all final day testing, making sure everything's good to go. The range is in. We're all communicating. ULA is running all the tests. We're sitting, watching all the data come in. We're making sure that pressures are within tolerance, that all temperatures and everything like that are good to go. And then we'll get down towards the final count once it's all fueled up and get ready to watch her burn.
So we're nice. So where are you sitting? Where are you sitting? What's the room like? You guys sitting together? Is it like all the big decision makers, or do you have different ops centers? What's that like?
There's several different centers. So ULA has their launch control center. We call the launch LVLSE. Launch vehicle, it's for our ESCO, sorry. Can't remember all the acronyms. We just run out of them.
You know what it is, though.
Yeah, I know where it is. And then you guys sit down at the mock, right?
Yeah, the entire range crew sits down at the mock towards the south end of base, and that's where pretty much the entire range crew sits in like our giant mission control room. And then you also have the weather team as well that sits down in the mock, as well as the scheduling team that is in charge of actually approving any schedule requests.
In the mock, what kind of things are you monitoring? Who's in there? What kind of decisions are you having to make? Are there certain phases you make a decision, or are you all just straight up reactionary?
So there are a few big milestones within the minus count for the range team. Some of the bigger ones are range hold fire checks. So that's one of the big responsibilities of the range. Is if something goes wrong, then the range control officer, the mission flight control officer, and then OSM for pad safety, they all have the responsibility to stop the count and kind of delay launch, I guess, and then reschedule. So hold fire checks, and then that can happen for the user. I believe the last time you can hold for a user issue, or a range monitored user issue, I should say, is about T-minus 25 seconds. And then for this mission specifically, we call it TX, which is the last time any holds can be called. That's T-minus 1 second.
Okay.
For this mission specifically. So you have hold fire checks, you have a flight termination system open loop checks. Okay. So they're just ensuring that the termination system on the vehicle and at the mock are working together and are fully mission capable for the launch. And then you also have the final clear to launch poll that the ROC coordinates with the Launch Decision Authority, as well as the MD and the Chief of Safety for the mission.
Let me ask you this: when it comes to launch hold, are you for this mission? Are you the one who's making this decision, or is it like a 06 1-star? Or is it like a first lieutenant? Is it like a group of the Illuminati? How is this going on here? Because the reason I ask is because you're watching these, we're in Colorado Springs and we're watching these,
right.
And sometimes you're wondering who's making this decision? God, So I'm curious, how does that decision get made?
So for a hypothetical situation, let's say that we lose telemetry coverage, which is a user and range mandatory item. So our range engineer is going to come over the nets and pull myself, the ROC, the RCO, as well as the MIFCO, or Mission Flight Control Officer.
Okay.
And they're going to tell us what's going on. Your RCO and your MIFCO are going to recognize that that's something that we absolutely need to meet our safety requirements, and they're responsible for any sort of quick response actions. So if the MIFCO, since it'll be a range safety item, the MIFCO will be the one that flips, or that will be responsible for holding. And the MIFCO for this mission is a first lieutenant as well.
Have you had to make this decision before, or any of these kind of decisions to hey, I'm gonna 25-year-old first lieutenant, I'm gonna make the call to hold this multi-million-dollar operation up?
So we actually came really close for Parker probe last year on the Delta Heavy, because we were getting some degraded S-band telemetry signals. Luckily, it came through right around 50 seconds, T-minus 50 seconds. Otherwise, we would have had to stop the launch.
Nice. And for the most part, your leadership's just hey, you are the decision maker. You bow up, make the decision. They give you support. That
Yep.
kind of deal?
We have delegated authority and training to make sure that we can do that.
Nice. All right. So what would you say, like, the key highlights of what's going on here, like, for GPS-3, this upcoming mission? What would you say, like, are, like, the big things that people, that you would tell your mom when you call her? You know, what's the big stuff?
I mean, it's GPS. It's a huge name satellite. The coolest part is just knowing that we can have a very involved part in getting such a important system up in orbit, and then, like, obviously support the warfighter, because, like, that's the intended mission. But then also I get to, like, route home on my smartphone or be able to use an ATM because of the system that's going up.
Do you consider yourself like a I mean, you talk about warfighting, and, like, it's so crazy how, like, warfighting, that very definition has evolved, and what you used to think is, like, the person, like, in the trenches, and now, you know, if a nation were to take away our GPS, take away our ability to get money out of the bank, I mean, do you consider what you're doing here, like, warfighting?
So, Spacelift as an enterprise is largely space warfighting support, because we get the systems up in orbit. So a lot of times it's kind of easy to get in that mindset of this is a support mission, but if it wasn't here, then none of it would happen. So you kind of have to keep a really broad view of everything that's going on and know what part of the mission you're fulfilling.
Like, one of the things, like, one of our more recent episodes was with the vice president of GPS from Lockheed Martin, and he's talking about how this thing is just way more resilient when it comes to, like, jamming, hacking, all that stuff. You know, heaven forbid, you know, another country, if someone wants to, you know, take away our GPS, like, things happen, not good things either. You know, like, you know, how about, I mean, like, you know, what are your thoughts?
I mean, we definitely consider it supporting the warfighter. But yeah, absolutely. It's not just our everyday life that it would affect. It would be, you know, everything, you know, military-wise as well. So it's a big issue. As we're gonna have some visitors here pretty soon.
Yeah. Yeah. So since we are, like, you know, on scene, on location, one of the upsides is, you know, we don't necessarily have, like, fans running behind us with, like, Wisconsin flags and all that stuff, like, you know, game day. But we have these big old vehicles. So hopefully they're just gonna go by real quick, like a Band-Aid. But hey, or they can just hang out. Is gonna go? They're gonna go. All right. Please don't run me over, because that would not be cool.
Once again, that's why I sat over here on this side. Stay away from that.
Oh, fans. No. Oh man. And that's the best joke I've ever told on the podcast. So glad you all got to hear that. No. Yeah, so you were saying, like, you do, like, this is a warfighting function.
Yeah, so basically just providing that all the tools that we can use, anyone can use, as far as everyday life. That's great, but then it is used downrange, no matter where you're at. Everybody has some part of GPS. It affects pretty much every part of our everyday life. So it's pretty cool to be able to help throw that up into orbit. So.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that this is, like, what, you know, we're generation space, right? So the next generation, our kids' generation, all that stuff. I mean, they're going to be, you know, there's a good chance they may be, you know, maybe, you know, dabbling in GPS-3. You know, this might be supporting them in the function, you know, in their way of life. You think of all the updates they're able to do to the GPS system on orbit. What we put up there now, it's just like my smartphone's always getting updated. You know, that system's always getting updated. That's pretty neat when you think about it like that. You know. So I know we talked about a lot. Is there anything we haven't talked about that maybe you guys want to mention, or maybe you just want to foot stomp again? You know, this is your opportunity to say whatever you want. Yankees are going to take the World Series, you know, for example.
Not at all. No. But I know my Indians aren't either, so it's okay. But no, I mean, it's a pretty incredible mission that we get to do out here every day. You know, it's one of those where working with ULA, with the spacecraft OEMs, you know, it's pretty awesome. It's never two things are the same, you know. So it's a unique opportunity, especially get to do it in sunny Florida. So there are far worse places to work, far worse jobs to do. So I'm pretty fortunate.
I think most of our space wings, they're no offense to Global Strike Command, but most of our Air Force bases are in like awesome locations. The worst one is like Colorado Springs. You know, I mean, that's the only one that doesn't have a beach for the most part. You know, all the other ones are vacation destinations. It's not bad.
Greenland. I'm gonna go there for my next vacation.
That one, it's a little. We've been up there. Northern Lights. You got that going for you. So that's something. How about you? What would you say LT is?
So I think just to kind of reiterate, like this, it's definitely a cool time to be in space as a entire sector, but space lift itself is also changing really rapidly, and it's just really cool to kind of just be on the forefront of all those changes that are going to affect the business, I say colloquially, but all these changes that are going on that are going to be affecting people's lives in the broad scope for years to come.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool, like the changes, even just being like a space operator now versus, back in the day, we've had folks who, 06 has come on the show and say, we used to be like the last kid picked in dodgeball, now we're the first kid, like it's cool to be in space again, and you guys are on the forefront of that, so. Generation space, but what? Cool. Well, thank you both for taking time to be on the show. A little something for you. So we don't have our cool sticker up right now or sign, but we have some Generation Space stickers. They're going to be getting ones that say crew member on it in a little bit. So this is just a couple for you.
Okay, thank you.
A couple for you. We can't confirm nor deny the fact that these are now on the beach in Cocoa. So if you go to different places, you will see them at the bars, pubs, and other places that we've never been to ever. But yeah, just throwing those out there. So thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Cool. Well, that's it for this episode of Generation Space. Thanks for joining us. Sorry for the little bit of the delay. I know we've had a couple, a break in the shows, but thanks for joining us as we talk about GPS 3. So that's it. Thanks.